Hey y'all, William did a Pungo Prairie. Now I believe that every great meal is worthy of a great story to go along with it, especially one that's steeped in as much tradition as this recipe, and I just happen to have one. In 1911, Zofia Taddeusz married Lucjan Martysewicz Wojkielio, who had descended from Polish nobility dating all the way back to the 16th century. They had two daughters, Irena and Helucia, who died from a brain disease at age 5, then a son. Taddeusz Martysewicz was born in Kalno, Lithuania on July 8, 1916. When Lithuanian nationalism swept the country in 1919, Poles were persecuted. His mother, Zofia, died. In 1923, his sister Irena was left with a governess to attend school in Vilna. Taddeusz and his father fled the country. Papa Lucjan became a ranger in the remote Ryniki forests of northeastern Poland. Life was harsh there, with no electricity, having to survive sub-freezing temperatures in the winter and the wolves in the forest. Young Taddeusz did, however, cultivate a great love for nature. He would often collect wild blueberries and wild borowick mushrooms. These, along with occasional wild game, helped to sustain he and his dad. Taddeusz graduated high school in 1936 and won a coveted spot at the Aviation Cadet School in Dublin. He graduated 5th in his class and was assigned as navigator and bomber pilot to the Polish 5th Air Force Regiment in Lida. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Taddeusz flew bombing and reconnaissance missions until their small air force was depleted, their planes destroyed. He had one last small plane to fly, an RWD-8, which ran short on fuel and had to ditch in a field. He managed to catch up on foot with the others in his squadron, being evacuated by ground. They were surrounded by Russian troops and imprisoned. Taddeusz, along with a fellow cadet, made a daring daytime escape from the prison camp. They managed to reach the Romanian border and then were captured by Romanian soldiers and conscripted to spy on the Russians. During transport by train to Bucharest, the two escaped again and managed their way to the British Embassy. Through the British network, Taddeusz made his way to Western Europe. Upon his arrival in France, he joined the Polish bomber wing based in Clermont-Ferrand. Taddeusz was one of the last evacuated to England, where he then enlisted in the Royal Air Force's 305th and 300 squadrons made up of other Polish expatriates. Bombing raids were made at night into German territory, where the average survival rate was 10 flights per crew. Taddeusz safely completed 34. For his heroism, he was awarded the Cross of Valor 4 times and the Virtuti Militari, the Polish equivalent to the U.S. military Medal of Honor. After the war, Taddeusz pursued an engineering degree in London. He noticed it seemed every day this hot chick with great legs would be riding the same underground line. Taddeusz married Patricia Russell in 1946. He later became a British citizen as Edward Martin, having changed his name to overcome employment and security clearance issues. In 1952, their first child, Paul, was born, and the Martins immigrated to America, eventually becoming U.S. citizens. Ed and Pat would have 3 more children, Janet, John, and Frances Irena, named for his beloved sister. Frances later became an accomplished artist. I met Fran at an art show in Virginia Beach in August 1986. I bought 2 of her paintings, learning in the process how much she loved watching dolphins. The following morning, she accepted my invitation to go dolphin watching on my boat off Cape Henry. A couple of weeks later, I flew to Myrtle Beach to meet Ed and Pat, where they were vacationing. Upon our meeting, I was undergoing a bit of interrogation from Pat. "Just what do you do for money?" she inquired in her sweet yet demanding English accent. Ed bristled and fired back at Pat. "Now, Patty, someone has finally agreed to marry Frances. Knock it off." Me, not wanting to seem disrespectful and leave Pat's question go unanswered, I told her I was a drug dealer. She didn't ask me any more questions after that. I think she just thought I was a pharmacist. Fran and I were married in October. Hey, I guess she just liked my cooking. We had a beautiful daughter, which now added one more to the already 4 other grandkids at the time for Papa Ed and Grandma Pat. A few years later, Ed asked me to design and build for him a house near the Pungo Prairie. He and Pat wanted to move from Cincinnati to be closer to his daughters. I happily agreed and spent the next 2 years designing, drawing the plans, developing the 3-acre site, and finally building the house. After the home was completed, Ed and Pat arrived to move in the day before his 81st birthday. He then asked me to help him design and build a formal English garden for his beautiful British bride. I began excavation and spent the following summer laying by hand the 14,000 brick paver herringbone pattern walkways for the garden, complete with central fountain and a pergola with a stone pathway from rocks my son and I collected near my hunting camp in the mountains of Virginia. One night I was fixing venison for supper. Papa Ed asked if I'd ever made Bigos. Bigos? What's Bigos? I asked. It's Polish hunter supper, he said, like a stew. I grew up on it when I was living back in Poland with my father in the Rudnicki forest, so he told me how to make it, just like I'm going to show y'all how to make now. So don't go nowhere, 'cause you don't want to miss this. Now let me tell you about what we got going in our Bigos. We have a Polish kielbasa, a nice chunk of hickory smoke-cured bacon, some hickory smoke-cured pork chops, and a nice chunk of venison. We got a head of cabbage. This was a small head, so I'm using the whole thing. Some dried porcini mushrooms, a couple of carrots, 6 dried prunes, some garlic cloves, maybe 2 or 3, a couple of bay leaves, a whole sweet onion, and some sauerkraut. About a teaspoon of some caraway seeds, and we're going to use about a half a stick of this butter. We're going to dice up this apple and put it in there for a little sweetness to go along with them dried prunes. And if we need a little bit of extra liquid, we got some beef broth. We're going to use about a cup of this red wine in there towards the end. And we're going to use a little bit of this fresh parsley chopped up as a garnish and a little bit of fresh flavor as we serve up our stew. We got these nice dried porcini mushrooms that are going to give us a nice earthy and woodsy flavor to go in our stew. But the first thing we're going to do is get them rehydrated by soaking them in about a cup and a half of some nice warm water for about 30 minutes. Now we're just going to shred up our cabbage, make it kind of coarse. First thing I'm going to do is kind of come in here and cut that little hard core right out of the middle. And then we're just going to do nice coarse slices. Now we're going to dice up our onion. Add our onions into the bowl here with our cabbage. Get our carrots peeled up. Dice them. Kind of big chunks. Next, mince up our garlic. Get it nice and fine. Add that. In our 5-quart cast iron Dutch oven here, we're going to melt up our half a stick of butter. In goes our cabbage, carrots, onions, and garlic. Get it all mixed up nice. Then goes our sauerkraut. About a 16-ounce jar. Add that in. Now I'm going to peel and dice up our apple. Take the core out. And cut our prunes in half. Maybe cut them in 4 pieces. That jet flying over, that might be Papa Ed. Who knows? Now I'm going to take and drain the liquid, the water off of our porcini mushrooms here. Kind of dice up our mushrooms a little bit, in little pieces. Under this little dish. In they go into our sweet and sour cabbage along with our carrots and our diced up onions and that garlic. It's kind of been cooking down a little bit in that melted butter. Had our diced up apples and prunes right on in there. I'm going to add a little over a cup of our beef broth. Next goes our teaspoon of caraway seeds. Put a lid on it and let that cabbage and sauerkraut along with them other good things just kind of simmer down in there a little bit in that pot while we work on the meat. Now we're going to prepare our meat. Cube up our bacon first. Just like so. Now I like to cube up my bacon because it gives you a nice little chunk of meat to chew on instead of some just skinny, wimpy little slice. Jiminy Christmas. Here comes Papa Ed again, I think. He's flying over here. Make sure I'm doing this right, I reckon. And just get our bacon browning up in this nice iron skillet. Now while our bacon's frying up to a nice golden brown, we're going to cut up our kielbasa. Okay, now that our bacon's all nice and browned up, we're going to add that right into our pot here with all our cabbage. Give our bacon a little stir around in that Dutch oven. That goes our lid. And then it goes our kielbasa right into the skillet with all that bacon grease. We're going to brown that up a little bit. Now some of you folks might like to cut these kielbasa slices in half again and have littler bites. Personally, I like my Bigos to be a little chunky. Next, we're going to cube up our venison. Kind of about 3/4 inch or so chunks. This right here, I trimmed off a roast off with a ham. This is going to be nice and tender and add a lot of good flavor into that Bigos. And in the pot with our nice browned up slices of kielbasa. Give all that nice toss around in there. And into the skillet with our cubed up venison. Probably already enough salt in there from that bacon and that kielbasa. But we're going to add a little bit of some fresh ground black pepper. Got the blood rising on top. We'll flip a little chunk of venison over and brown up the other side. Man, that looks good all by itself. And in the pot with our venison. All browned up nice. Get our venison all blended in there good with our other ingredients. And now we're going to add a couple of bay leaves. About another ½ cup or so of our beef broth. A little bit more fresh ground pepper, not too much. Put the lid back on it. Put a little bit more wood on the wood stove here. Just put our pot right on top of the wood stove. Now I'm just going to turn the heat back a little bit. And just let our stew simmer there a couple hours on that wood stove and let that sweet cabbage and sour cabbage and carrots and caraway and garlic and onions and butter and all those delicious meats get to know each other a little bit in that pot. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey Dixon, what about them smoked pork chops? I got them right here. Now I'm going to brown them up in that skillet and save them in this little dish right here. And we're going to add them towards the end because actually these things are already cooked and we don't want to cook them to death. So now that we got our pork chops cooked, we're just going to add our pan drippings right on into the stew. Back on with the lid. Now traditionally back in the day, Bigos was made up with a blend of meats from wild game, like venison, wild ducks and geese, rabbit, maybe even wild boar. That's why it's called hunter's stew. Now, where we use the venison, you might want to substitute and cube up some fresh beef and put it in there. Where we use the smoked pork chops, you might want to cut up some fresh pork loin. Another thing a lot of folks do is they will add some diced canned tomatoes in there. But personally, I do enough Italian cooking where I decided this time I'd go without the tomatoes. Now it's been a couple of hours. I'm just going to take our cup of red wine and add that in there. Man, that's smelling good. Ain't that pretty? Now we kind of got our stew pot pushed off to the side towards the warming shelf on our wood stove, because at this point we want it to cook really, really slow, like on low in a crock pot, only redneck style, just like I can imagine young Taddeusz and his daddy had way up there in the Rudniki forest in northeastern Poland back in 1923, because I doubt very seriously they had a plug-in electric crock pot. Now we're just going to add our smoked pork chops into the pot. Put them right around like so. All that extra juice. Give them a few minutes in there to warm up nice and hot. And our Bigos is ready to dish up. Take and get one of our pork chops. Put that right down in there like so. And get a little broth to go with it. Carve us off a nice piece of this fresh, homemade, artisan bowl of rye bread. A glass of this Yingling lager. A little bit of our fresh parsley right on top. And because this Baron Jaeger honey whiskey liqueur was one of Ed's favorites, we're going to pour a glass so we can drink us a little toast. Lord, thank you for great men and women that answer duty's call and have the courage to rise up against tyranny. Thank you for their stories. Thank you for this amazing meal. Bless it now to strengthen our bodies and lift our spirits for a life in Thee. Through Jesus we pray. Amen. Now you know I've been dying to dive into this. A little bit of that cabbage and a little piece of that venison there. I'm going to tell you something. That Bigos is bountiful on flavor. I can't even begin to describe to you everything that's going on in that bowl. A different blend of meats, that sweet and sour cabbage, a little bit of sweetness from those prunes and that apple, a little rustic edge of flavor from those porcini mushrooms. And let me tell you, if you've never made Bigos before, this Polish hunter stew, you need to make you up a pot. To honor and memory, young Taddeusz Markusewicz, 7-year-old boy, lost his mama, had to leave his sister behind and flee along with his daddy from the only home he had known to go live in a remote wilderness place, stare down hungry wolves. Went on to graduate high school, joined the Polish Air Force where he became a pilot and navigator. Had to ditch his plane, was captured by the enemy, escaped, captured again, escaped again. Joined the RAF, flew 34 bombing raids into enemy territory to help defeat the Nazi Germany war machine, liberate Western Europe, and help keep America free too. Immigrated to the United States, became an American citizen, traveled the world as an electrical engineer for Westinghouse, Kaiser Aluminum, and Stamco Tool Company. Raised a family. When his bride of more than 50 years became ill, he took care of her every single day right up until the very end. Awarded the Virtuti Militari Silver Cross, Medal of Honor amongst his people. He has the Medal of Honor amongst his family. I don't know what might have even become of me had it not been for him. Taddeusz, Papa Ed Martin, you were and your legacy lives on as a shining example for what every man should aspire to be. I know you're watching over me. Here's to you, my other dad. And that, girls and boys, is what's cooking on the Pungo Prairie.
Wiem, co daj moje sny I zabierz na pamiątkę te łzy, gorące łzy. Wiem, co daj serce moje, wiem, co daj moje sny I zabierz na pamiątkę te łzy, gorące łzy.